Hi and welcome. So these are 7 reasons why, which is a complete contrarian view from 99% of those out there who are talking about market values for residential homes. This is strictly for residential homes. It's not about supply and demand for renters. If you're a renter, from the renting housing market view, obviously this has nothing to do with the stock market, and that and where that's at. Nothing to do with commercial real estate. This is strictly market value for residential homes. There's 7 reasons why there's not going to be a crash. And these calls have been going on for a couple of years now, like I mentioned. And I think it's primarily because the freshness still and the sting of a collapse going up to 50% of market values of residential homes that just happened just over a decade ago is still fresh in a lot of people's minds, and so they think somehow that this is going to necessarily happen again. And when that, I will argue, is something that only would happen maybe once every 2 or 3 generations. It was just too colossal, and it was a perfect storm. If you remember, if you go back to 2006, 2007, hardly anyone was talking about a residential crash. And of course, it didn't happen. Now, most people are talking about it, and it's not going to happen. And there's 7 reasons why it's not going to happen, and let's get to them. Okay, so first thing is I've made a much longer video, so I'm going to try and condense this down to certainly under 5 minutes. I'm going to put the links down or the link down in the subscription in the definition below. So first thing is this is a condensed summary of a video I did last week. It was a much longer video. I think it was almost 30 minutes, and it gave all the reasons why people are saying that there's going to be a market crash. So I went over them individually and then brought back the reasons why there isn't going to be a market crash, from my opinion. This is just a condensed, sweetened, shortened view. So let's get on with these. So the first thing I have is actually what I call the Ricky Roma rule. And for those of you who are big fans of Glengarry Glen Ross will know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a point there when Ricky's having a drink, and James Link says something to him, and Ricky Roma says, quote, "If everybody says one thing, I say bet the other way," end quote. So you got to be a big fan of that. But now this might seem a little bit silly, but one of the most famous quotes from the most famous investor of Warren Buffett, who's actually a bit of a socialist, which is a good topic for another video. Amazing at capitalism with his money, socialist with his mouth, but that's a whole other discussion. Warren Buffett's famous quote that went, but that's a contrarian view. That's a complete opposite rule. So I like to call it Ricky Roma rule because I'm a big Ricky Roma fan, but it's the same thing. How many times have you seen in our society and through the news events when they're absolutely predicting something that's going to happen and they don't have an assurance for it, and it just completely falls flat on its face? I mean, we're actually living through it right now with the lockdown. Okay, that's one example. Russia collusion is another one. Housing market crash from a financial point of view is yet another one. So Ricky Roma is actually the first rule here. Second rule, low interest rates are not going away. There's no indication that they're going to go away. If we look worldwide and the pressures brought in by IMF and WEC, there are countries around the world who have actually gone so far as negative rates. I don't think the negative rates will come here to the U.S. Jerome Powell said, not that you need to believe any of these guys, but he said he's not going to go there. I think that's probably going to be the case. So with low interest rates, when interest rates go high, there's less mortgages, and there's less churn in terms of potential markets being sold and being bought. Now, there is a point to be made that the commercial banks have tightened up the screws because we're in a lockdown here in terms of how much money they'll lend, and there's definitely indications for that. So that's definitely something to consider, but they are still happening. But this point is specific to support my suggestion from a low interest rate point of view. Second thing is unemployment trending down, unless there's going to be a complete lockdown again the way we had in March, which I think is unlikely, even with the hardcore Marxist governors and city comrades that we have like de Blasio. I'm probably going to regret saying that. Actually, I'd have to take that back. There might be a few points in some few cities where, come to think of it, they'll probably do a lockdown. Hopefully, won't be as wide and universal as they were in March. So my prediction is that those types of lockdowns are, for the most part, behind us. I hope I'm not going to regret saying that one. Next thing, unemployed. This is very important. So the majority of the people who are unemployed are mostly unskilled, low-skilled people. They don't have a lot of net worth. They don't have, on average, the amount of home ownership or stake in homes. They're the lower end demographically in terms of those people that have been cut. A certain amount of them have already got their jobs back. If we look at GDP, actually here in the third quarter, it's up 33%. And it's the highest GDP in any quarter. Now, of course, that's because a lockdown pretty much across the country started to be released during the summer. But a lot of those people, even these unskilled people, I say a lot, they got their jobs back. There's millions and millions of people who don't have jobs. But here's the point. What the crash was it was a true housing market crash in 2008. Okay, it was all centered. The platform of the center of that perfect storm was around real estate, residential home real estate. This is not true with the lockdown. The lockdown is across the entire economy. It's different. It's not the same thing. So when we have the unemployed here and those who might actually be affected in terms of needing forbearance, and there are plenty of people needing forbearance and have taken those. There's also a certain amount of them who didn't really need to do that, and they're just trying to take some of that money and stash it under the mattress or pay off some debt. So the point is here, there's big numbers in unemployment. It's true. It's also true that the numbers are coming down, and it's also true it's disproportionately people who don't own homes because they're on the lower end of the economic scale. Okay, now the red ones here, I saved these for last. These red ones are the primary and the most important reasons for why there isn't going to be a housing crash. Let's get to the first one, low housing supply. Want to know the biggest reason why? This is it right here, monthly supply of houses in the United States. This is over 50 years. This is where we're at right now. This, I believe, is actually the lowest, 3.4. That's a 3.4 months supply of homes on the market. And that actually looks like it's literally the lowest that it's been in, that's about 55 years. Okay, and this is the main thing. This is the GFC, global financial crisis, right? 2009, hit in 2008. 2009 was already rising. It was starting to rise around 2006. Anyway, the point here is this is why the prices dropped 50% is because the market, the supply, completely was gluttonous on homes all throughout the whole country. Obviously, there were some really huge areas in California, Atlanta, Florida that were hit. I know it all too well, 40 to 50% loss in market values. But this is the biggest reason why. This is the effect out of all the MBS and the subprime lending. Ultimately, was supply. This is what it comes down to. The supply was through the roof into the atmosphere, and right now it's completely the lowest in 55 years. And this is your number one reason. Now this might come back up a little bit. But most people, unless you're trying to flee Marxist cities like New York City, Portland, LA, San Francisco, or anywhere really in California and running to Nevada and trying to escape the high taxes and the intentional destruction of these cities for ideological reasons, the biggest thing that ever comes down to is supply and demand. The supply here is so low. There's so many people who are still holding steady in this lockdown who are not moving. unless you're escaping one of those hellholes. This is the number one reason. And this, even if this comes up a little bit when mortgages come due, some foreclosures that are going to happen in the first quarter, because there's no longer a forbearance, and no longer living in a fantasy world where we stop the world, where our government officials stop the world in the second quarter. This certainly can come up, but look at how low it is. It's not going to go through the roof. People are holding steady. This is not happening. That supply is still going to remain unbelievably low. There are people still want to buy homes. They want to escape. They want to move. Other people that aren't affected and have gotten through this, and it's not happening. This is the number one reason why you're not going to get it in 2021. And you know what? Those same people then say it's going to crash in 2022. And when they say that, you need to not listen to them. All right, next reason, hardly any subprime loans in comparison to 2008. Everything with Sarbanes-Oxley and the total crunch that happened was something to the likes that we've never seen before in generations. I think you might have to go back to the Great Depression to see any type of collapse like that. And those collapses back then weren't really relative to real estate so much. It was more about a depression, loss of jobs, and the stock market crashing down to the floor. This doesn't exist at all in spirit, in breath, compared to 2008. And those people completely crashed and burned. So did those big banks as well. But this big marker, which is one of this plus the mortgage-backed securities, which is also the last reason here. There's no mortgage-backed security derivatives crisis that's going to happen, because those types of derivatives and the minimum levels on terms of how much you can buy and the requirements around them to keep them secure have completely changed, just as they have for the requirements for an individual to get a mortgage. It's different. The average level of the creditworthiness of any MBS or derivatives, or the average creditworthiness levels of your average mortgage holder in, let's say, 2020, before the lockdowns hit, is completely different and so much stronger, so much more financially sound than it was in 2007. So here you go. Here's our 3 reasons, but we've got 7 overall. And, we will see a year from now who's right. But keep watching. I've got other new videos on this new channel, and I appreciate you being here. Until next time, be seeing you